When a desperate widow on the Arizona frontier faces starvation with her young son, a mysterious Navajo hunter arrives with an impossible proposal that could save them both or destroy everything they know. But the shocking arrangement they forge will challenge every rule of the untamed West and test whether survival can transform strangers into something far more powerful. The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Elena Hartley's small adobe house as she clutched her infant daughter Rebecca against her chest, desperately trying to quiet the baby's hungry cries. The northern Arizona territory of 1858 was unforgiving to everyone, but especially cruel to a widow alone with two small children. Her husband, David, had been killed just 2 months earlier when his horse threw him during a storm, leaving her isolated with 5-year-old Ben and their newborn. Elena's voice cracked with exhaustion as she whispered soothing words that felt hollow even to her own ears. "Hush now, sweet girl," she murmured, though her body had stopped producing enough milk weeks ago. The constant worry and meager rations had taken their toll, leaving her weak and her baby perpetually unsatisfied. Through the small window, she watched Ben struggling to carry water from the creek, the bucket nearly as large as the boy himself. Her heart shattered watching her son attempt to fill his father's shoes. The boy had aged years in mere weeks, his young face pinched with determination and fear. "Ben, come inside now," she called, setting the crying baby in her rough-hewn cradle. "The sun's too hot. We'll finish the chores when it cools down, but Pa always said we can't let the animals go thirsty," Ben protested, his small voice trying to sound strong and grown. His hands were blistered from work, far too demanding for a child his age. "I can do it, Ma. I'm the man of the house now." "You've done more than enough, sweetheart," Elena said softly, though pride and sorrow warred in her chest. She knew David would have been proud of their son's courage, but he would have been heartbroken to see childhood stolen so soon. As Ben trudged inside, his clothes dusty and his face streaked with dirt, Elena noticed movement in the distance. 3 riders approached slowly from the red rock canyons to the east. Her pulse quickened as she reached for David's old rifle, though she had only fired it once, and the recoil had nearly knocked her down. Living on the edge of Navajo territory meant constant awareness, though most encounters had been peaceful trading exchanges. The riders stopped at a respectful distance from her property line. The lead figure sat tall on a painted horse, his long dark hair tied back with a red cloth. Even from this distance, Elena could see the strength in his bearing and the careful deliberation in his movements. He raised one hand in a gesture of peace. Elena stepped onto the small porch, keeping Ben behind her skirts. "State your business," she called out, trying to make her voice sound steadier than she felt. The rifle felt heavy and awkward in her trembling hands. The lead rider dismounted with fluid grace and approached on foot, stopping well short of the house. "I am Tall Shadow of the Diné people," he said in surprisingly clear English, his deep voice carrying easily across the dusty yard. "I know of your husband's death. The wind carries news across these lands." Elena tightened her grip on the rifle, though something in the man's demeanor suggested he meant no harm. "What do you want from us?" she asked, acutely aware of Rebecca's cries echoing from inside the house. Tall Shadow's dark eyes moved to the open doorway where the baby's wails grew more desperate. "Your child suffers from hunger. Your boy works beyond his years. Winter will come in 4 moons, and you have no man to hunt or protect you." "We're managing just fine," Elena lied, though they both knew the truth. Their food stores were nearly depleted, and she had no idea how to trap game or defend against predators, human or animal. "I do not think you are managing," Tall Shadow said without cruelty, simply stating an observable fact. "I lost my wife singing rain when she brought our daughter into this world. Morning Star has seen 4 moons, but my sister who nursed her had to return to her husband's clan in the northern mountains. My daughter grows weaker each day without a mother's milk." Elena's maternal instinct stirred, despite her wariness. "You have an infant?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. Tall Shadow gestured to one of his companions, who carefully unwrapped a small bundle. Even from a distance, Elena could see the tiny baby, her copper skin and dark eyes, so different from Rebecca's, yet the vulnerability so achingly similar. Unlike Rebecca's lusty protests, the Navajo baby made only weak, mewling sounds. Too exhausted to cry properly, she needs strength to survive. Tall Shadow continued, his voice carrying the weight of a father's desperation. You need meat for your table, and someone to teach your son the ways of tracking and hunting. You need protection from those who would take advantage of a woman alone. Ben tugged at Elena's skirt. Ma, what's he talking about? The boy whispered, his blue eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. Elena looked from her own hungry baby to the Navajo infant, from her struggling son to the strong hunter before her. Every lesson she had learned about propriety and separation between settlers and natives warred with the brutal reality of their situation. What exactly are you proposing? She asked carefully. I will bring game to your table. I will teach your son to track deer and read the signs of the land. I will ensure no harm comes to your family, Tall Shadow said, his eyes never leaving hers. In return, you will nurse my daughter alongside your own. When the cold season passes and Morning Star is strong, we will speak again of what comes next. That's crazy talk, Elena said, though her conviction wavered. People would never understand. A white woman and a Navajo man sharing a household. Your people are not here, Tall Shadow observed. The nearest settlement is 3 days' ride. Out here only survival matters. Customs and judgments are luxuries for those with full bellies and safe homes. Eleanor's mind raced through their options. She could refuse and continue struggling alone, watching her children slowly starve. She could abandon David's homestead and try to make the dangerous journey to Santa Fe, where she knew no one and had no prospects. Or she could accept this strange offer from a man whose people were supposed to be her enemy, but whose desperation mirrored her own. Ma, the baby's still crying, Ben said softly, breaking into her thoughts. Inside, Rebecca's wails had reached a fevered pitch, the sound piercing Elena's heart like a knife. Tall Shadow took a calculated risk and stepped closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. From a leather pouch at his side, he withdrew something that made Elena gasp. It was David's silver compass, the one he had carried every day, the one she thought had been lost when his horse had thrown him. Where did you get that? She demanded, fresh grief and confusion flooding through her. I found your husband after his accident, Tall Shadow said quietly. He was still breathing when I reached him. I tried to help, but the injury to his head was too severe. His last words were of his wife Elena and his son Ben. He asked me to watch over his family if anything should happen to him. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she took the compass with shaking hands. David spoke to you. In his final moments? Her voice broke on the words. He told me you were strong and brave. He said you had come west against your family's wishes because you believed in building a new life. He made me promise. Tall Shadow's voice carried a weight of honor-bound duty. I have watched your home from the ridges since that day, ensuring you were not threatened. But watching is not enough. You need more than distant protection. Ben looked up at the tall Navajo hunter with new eyes. You were with my pa when he died? Did he say anything about me? The boy's voice trembled with the question he had been too afraid to ask anyone. Tall Shadow knelt down to the child's level, his weathered face softening. He said you were clever and strong. He said you would take care of your mother and sister. He was proud of you, young one. Fresh sobs racked Eleanor's body as she clutched the compass. David had not died completely alone. Someone had been there, had heard his final thoughts, had honored his last request. The fact that this person was Navajo seemed suddenly less important than the sacred duty he was trying to fulfill. Come inside, Elena heard herself say, the words surprising even her. Out of this heat. We can talk more. Tall Shadow's eyebrows rose slightly, the first sign of surprise he had shown. He exchanged glances with his two companions, who remained mounted. They spoke briefly in their own language before Tall Shadow turned back to Elena. My friends will wait here. I will come alone. As Tall Shadow followed Elena into the modest adobe home, Ben watched him with open fascination. The house was simple, just 2 rooms with dirt floors and rough furniture David had built. But it was clean and organized, showing Elena's determination to maintain dignity despite their hardships. In the dimmer interior, Tall Shadow's companion brought Morning Star to the doorway. The Navajo baby was wrapped in a beautifully woven blanket, decorated with geometric patterns. Up close, Eleanor could see how thin the child was, her tiny cheeks hollow and her lips cracked from dehydration. "She is dying," Tall Shadow said simply, without dramatics. "Another week, perhaps 2, and she will join her mother in the spirit world. I cannot let that happen. I will do anything to save her." Elena looked at her own Rebecca, red-faced and screaming from hunger, then back to the quiet, weakening Morning Star. In that moment, she saw not difference but sameness. 2 babies who needed what only she could provide. 2 children who had no choice in the circumstances of their birth, no control over the conflicts between their peoples. Without another word, Elena set down the rifle and reached for Morning Star. The baby felt frighteningly light in her arms, like a small bird rather than a human child. "Bring her here," she said softly, moving to the rocking chair David had made for her when Ben was born. Tall Shadow watched intently as Elena positioned both babies to nurse. Morning Star latched on immediately with surprising strength, her tiny body seeming to understand that salvation had arrived. Rebecca, no longer having to compete for insufficient nourishment, settled more calmly on the other side. "Until spring," Elena said firmly, looking up at Tall Shadow. "We help each other survive until spring. Then we decide what comes next, until spring." Tall Shadow agreed, his voice thick with emotion he did not try to hide. "You honor my daughter and my wife's memory. You honor your husband's final wish. This is a good path." As Morning Star nursed, her small hand wrapped around Elena's finger with a grip that seemed to grow stronger by the moment. Outside, the Arizona sun continued its relentless march across the sky, but inside the small adobe house, an impossible alliance had been forged. Ben tugged at Tall Shadow's buckskin leggings. "Will you really teach me to track? Pa was going to teach me, but then he—" The boy's voice trailed off, unable to finish. Tall Shadow placed a large hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "I will teach you everything. How to read the marks animals leave. How to move through the canyon without sound. How to know when rain is coming by watching the sky and the creatures. Your father would want you to learn these things. Can I learn to shoot a bow like yours?" Ben asked, his eyes bright with the first real excitement Elena had seen since David's death. "First you learn patience and observation," Tall Shadow said. "A hunter who cannot wait and watch will always go hungry. But yes, I will teach you the bow and the tracking and the ways of staying alive in this hard land." Elena rocked slowly, feeling both babies nursing strongly now. The situation was insane by any conventional measure. She was a white settler woman, allowing a Navajo man into her home, agreeing to nurse his child alongside her own, accepting his help in exchange for the most intimate act a mother could perform. Her family back east would be horrified. The townspeople in Prescott would call her everything from foolish to immoral. But none of those people were here. None of them were watching her children slowly starve. None of them had heard David's final words or understood the sacred weight of a dying man's request. Out here on the frontier, survival rewrote all the rules that civilization took for granted. "There is something you should know," Tall Shadow said, his voice growing serious. "Not all of my people will approve of this arrangement. And your people, if they learn of it, will be hostile. We must be careful. Are you in danger because of this?" Elena asked, suddenly concerned for this stranger who was trying to honor her husband's memory. "Some warriors believe any friendship with settlers is betrayal," Tall Shadow admitted. "But I am not a young man seeking approval. I'm a father trying to save my daughter. That is my only concern." Elena nodded slowly, understanding that they were both taking enormous risks. "Then we keep this arrangement private. You come and go quietly. We tell no one from town if they happen to visit." "Agreed," Tall Shadow said. "I will bring meat tomorrow. Tonight I will camp in the Red Rocks to the east, where I can watch over your home. No one will approach without my knowledge. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Tall Shadow prepared to leave. Morning Star had nursed herself into a deep, peaceful sleep, the first real rest she had probably known in weeks. Her small chest rose and fell with steady, stronger breaths. "Thank you," Tall Shadow said simply, as Elena carefully handed his daughter back to him. "You have given her life again. Bring her back tomorrow," Elena replied. "She'll need to nurse several times a day to regain her strength." After Tall Shadow and his companions had ridden away, Elena stood on the porch with Ben beside her, watching the desert darkness swallow the landscape. Rebecca slept contentedly in her cradle, finally satisfied after weeks of hungry crying. "Ma, is Tall Shadow going to be like a new pa?" Ben asked innocently, his child's mind trying to make sense of the strange new arrangement. Elena pulled her son close. "No, sweetheart, no one can replace your father. But Tall Shadow is going to help us, and we're going to help him. Sometimes people who are different can still take care of each other." "I liked him," Ben said simply. "He has kind eyes, not like Mr. Crawford from town." The mention of Silas Crawford sent a chill through Elena. The wealthy rancher had been sniffing around her property for months before David's death, making offers to buy their land and water rights. Since David's passing, Crawford's interest had become more aggressive, his visits more frequent, and his implications more threatening. She pushed the thought away for now, one problem at a time. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, both children would sleep with full bellies. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but perhaps, with this unlikely alliance, they might actually survive to see spring. As Elena prepared for bed, she clutched David's compass, feeling the smooth silver warmed by her hand. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," she whispered to her dead husband's memory. "I hope you really did ask him to watch over us. I hope this isn't the biggest mistake of my life." Outside in the Red Rock Canyons, Tall Shadow held his sleeping daughter close, feeling her breathe with a strength she had not possessed in weeks. "Thank you, Singing Rain," he whispered to his wife's spirit. "You guided me to the right path. Watch over us all in the difficult days ahead." The desert night settled around both households, bringing a temporary peace that neither Elena nor Tall Shadow fully trusted, but both desperately needed. 3 weeks had passed since the arrangement began, and the small adobe house had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Each dawn brought Tall Shadow to Elena's door, sometimes alone, sometimes with his friend Running Wolf, who kept watch from the ridges. The Navajo hunter never arrived empty-handed. Rabbit, venison, wild turkey, and once even a pronghorn antelope provided meat that Elena had nearly forgotten the taste of. Ben's hollow cheeks had filled out, and his energy had returned with the proper nourishment. The April morning broke clear and warm as Tall Shadow arrived to find Ben already awake and waiting on the porch, a small practice bow clutched in his eager hands. The boy had been carving it under Tall Shadow's instruction for nearly a week, his small fingers working the wood with surprising patience. "Good morning, teacher," Ben called out, using the title Tall Shadow had taught him in Navajo. His pronunciation was still clumsy, but the effort pleased the hunter. Tall Shadow dismounted smoothly, examining the bow Ben held up proudly. "You have done well, young tracker. The wood is shaped properly, and the string tension is good. Today we test if your eyes are as ready as your hands." Inside the house, Elena hummed softly while nursing both babies in the rocking chair. Morning Star had transformed in these short weeks. Her cheeks had rounded, her skin had taken on a healthy glow, and she had begun to make happy cooing sounds that brought unexpected joy to Eleanor's heart. Rebecca nursed contentedly on the other side, and Elena found herself no longer thinking of them as separate children, but simply as her daughters. "Your milk has saved my daughter's life," Tall Shadow said as he entered, leaving his weapons respectfully outside, as had become their custom. "She grows stronger each day. The spirits smile on this house." Elena looked up with a tired but genuine smile. "She's a sweet baby. Hardly fusses at all now that she's well fed. And Rebecca seems calmer having a companion." Tall Shadow watched the domestic scene with an expression Eleanor had learned to read over these weeks. Gratitude mixed with grief, hope tangled with loss. She knew he saw his dead wife in these quiet moments, remembered what should have been. "Tell me about Singing Rain," Eleanor said softly, breaking a silence that had grown comfortable between them. What was she like? Tall Shadow settled onto a rough wooden stool, his long frame folding gracefully. She was daughter of our clan's medicine woman. She knew which plants heal wounds and which ease fever. Her laugh sounded like water over stones. She wanted many children, a house full of noise and life. His voice carried such longing that Eleanor's heart ached for him. She would be glad you're keeping Morning Star alive. A mother's greatest fear is leaving her child unprotected, and your husband. Tall Shadow asked. You speak of him rarely. Does the pain remain too sharp? Elena adjusted the babies at her breast, considering her answer carefully. David was a dreamer. He believed we could build something out here, away from the rigid rules of Boston society. My family thought he was reckless, taking a wife and child into unsettled territory. But you came anyway, Tall Shadow observed. I believed in his dream, Elena said simply. Or maybe I just loved him enough to follow wherever he led. Now I'm not sure which. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sounds of nursing babies and the desert wind against the adobe walls. Over these weeks, they had developed an ease with each other that transcended their different worlds. Language barriers had crumbled through necessity and patience. Trust had grown from shared purpose. The boy is ready to learn tracking today, Tall Shadow announced, changing the subject as he often did when emotions ran too deep. I will take him into the canyons. We will be back before the sun reaches its peak. Elena nodded, though a flutter of maternal worry rose in her chest. Keep him safe. He's all I have left of David. I will guard him as my own blood, Tall Shadow promised with such solemnity that Elena knew he meant every word. An hour later, Ben walked beside Tall Shadow through the red rock canyons, his young eyes wide with wonder as the hunter pointed out signs invisible to untrained observers. See here, Tall Shadow said, kneeling beside a patch of disturbed earth. Deer pass this way at dawn. 3 of them. 2 does and a young buck. Ben squinted at the tracks, trying to see what Tall Shadow saw. How do you know there were 3? I only see marks in the dirt. Count the different hoof prints. See how this one is larger and deeper? That is the buck, heavier than the does. And here, this smaller print overlaps the others. That tells us they traveled together, not separated by time. The boy studied the ground intently, his face scrunched with concentration. Slowly, the chaos of marks began to resolve into a pattern, a story written in dust and stone. I see it now. And they were heading toward the creek. Why toward the creek? Tall Shadow prompted, teaching through questions as his own grandfather had taught him. Ben thought hard, applying what he had learned over previous lessons. Because animals need water, especially in the morning after the cool night. Good, Tall Shadow said with approval. A tracker who understands why animals move can predict where they will go next. Knowledge is more powerful than speed or strength. They spent the morning reading the desert's secrets. Tall Shadow showed Ben how to identify different bird calls and what they signified, how to tell fresh scat from old, predator from prey, how to move through brush without snapping twigs that would alert game to human presence. The boy absorbed everything with a hunger that reminded Tall Shadow of his own youth. Your father would be proud of your learning, Tall Shadow said as they paused to drink from a spring hidden among the rocks. You have the gift of patience, which many boys your age lack. Pa used to say patience was the difference between eating and going hungry, Ben replied, his voice carrying the echo of a father's lessons. I wish he could see me now. I wish he could know I'm trying to be strong like he wanted. Tall Shadow placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. The dead watch over those they love. Your father sees you. He knows you honor his memory with your courage. As they made their way back toward the house, Ben suddenly grabbed Tall Shadow's arm. Look, riders coming from the west. 5 of them. Tall Shadow's expression darkened as he recognized the lead horse. Go quickly to your mother. Tell her Silas Crawford comes. I will watch from the ridge. Why can't you come to the house? Ben asked, confused. Some men look for reasons to cause trouble. My presence would give them such a reason. Go now quickly. I will be close if you need me. Ben ran toward home as tall shadow melted into the rocks with the practiced invisibility of his people. From his hidden vantage point, he watched the 5 riders approach Elena's property. Silas Crawford sat his horse with the arrogance of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. His 4 hired men looked more like gunfighters than ranch hands. Elena had just finished laying both babies down for their nap when Ben burst through the door, breathless and worried. "Ma, Mr. Crawford's coming with 4 men. Tall Shadow said to tell you, and that he'd watch from the rocks." Eleanor's stomach knotted with anxiety. Crawford's visits had become more frequent and more aggressive since David's death. The rancher wanted their land, specifically their access to the spring creek that ran year-round. "Stay inside with the babies," she instructed Ben, reaching for the rifle though her hands trembled. She stepped onto the porch, just as Crawford and his men rode into the yard. The rancher was a thick-bodied man in his 50s, his face weathered by sun and hardened by years of taking what he wanted. "Mrs. Hartley," he called out with false pleasantness. "Looking well, I see." "Quite well indeed for a widow struggling alone, Mr. Crawford," Elena replied coolly. "I wasn't expecting visitors today." Crawford dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with deliberate heaviness. "That's what concerns me, Elena. May I call you Elena? We're neighbors, after all. I've been hearing troubling reports about activity around your property. What kind of reports?" Elena asked, keeping her voice steady, despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Indian tracks." One of Crawford's men spoke up, a scarred man named Dutch, who served as the rancher's enforcer. "Fresh ones. Multiple horses. Someone's been visiting regular like." Crawford held up a hand, silencing his man with false courtesy. Now, let's not alarm the lady unnecessarily. But Dutch raises a fair point, Elena. It's dangerous for a woman alone out here, especially with Navajo raiders known to be in the area. "I've had no trouble with any raiders," Elena said firmly. "We keep to ourselves and cause no one any problems." Crawford stepped closer to the porch, his eyes scanning the property with calculated assessment. "That's good to hear. But a widow with children needs protection, needs a man who can provide security and prosperity." The implication in his words was clear and made Elena's skin crawl. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Crawford, but we're managing just fine. Are you, though?" Crawford's voice took on a harder edge. "Your husband's been dead 2 months now. Winter's coming in a few months. You've got a boy too young to work and a baby to care for. How exactly do you plan to survive?" He paused, letting the question hang. "Unless you've found help somewhere. Help from people who shouldn't be on settler land." Elena's heart pounded, but she held Crawford's gaze. "I don't know what you're implying, Mr. Crawford, but I'll thank you to state your business plainly and then leave my property." Crawford's false pleasantness evaporated. "Fine, I'll be plain. I want this land. I wanted it when your husband was alive, and I want it now. That Spring Creek is worth more than gold in this territory. I've made you fair offers." "Offers I've refused," Elena interrupted. "This is my home. My husband built this house with his own hands. I'm not selling." "You will eventually," Crawford said with cold certainty. "Either to me, or you'll lose it when you can't pay the territorial taxes come fall. Or when something unfortunate happens out here. Accidents are common on the frontier, especially for women alone." The threat was unmistakable. Elena raised the rifle slightly, though her arms shook with the weight. "Get off my property, Mr. Crawford, now!" Crawford laughed, a sound without humor. "You going to shoot me, Elena? You and I both know you can barely hold that rifle, let alone fire it accurately. But I'm a patient man. I'll give you until summer's end to reconsider. After that," he shrugged, "well, I can't be responsible for what might happen to an unprotected homestead." As Crawford and his men mounted their horses, Dutch called back with a cruel smile. "Might want to be careful about those Indian tracks, Mrs. Hartley. Army patrols don't take kindly to settlers fraternizing with savages. Could lose a lot more than your land if word got out." Elena stood frozen on the porch until the riders disappeared in a cloud of dust. Only then did her legs give way, and she sank onto the wooden steps, the rifle clattering beside her. Tears of fear and rage streamed down her face. "Ma?" Ben's voice came from the doorway, small and frightened. "Are they gone?" Before Eleanor could answer, tall shadow appeared from the rocks, moving with such speed and silence that she hadn't seen him approach. His face was set in hard lines, his dark eyes blazing with controlled fury. "That man threatens you openly. This cannot stand. What can I do?" Elena asked helplessly. "He's right about everything. I can't pay the taxes. I can't protect this place. I can barely shoot that rifle without falling over from the recoil." Tall shadow knelt before her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You are not alone anymore. I made a promise to your husband and to you. Crawford will not take this land while I draw breath. But if people find out you're helping us, it will cause problems for both our peoples," Elena protested. "Crawford's man threatened to tell the army." "Let them tell," Tall Shadow said fiercely. "I'm not afraid of blue-coat soldiers or greedy ranchers. My daughter lives because of you. Your son learns and grows strong because I teach him. This is a bond more powerful than their threats." Elena wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "Crawford gave me until summer's end. That's only a few months away. Then we have time to prepare," Tall Shadow said. "I will teach your son not just to track, but to defend his home. I will make sure you can shoot that rifle without fear. And I will watch Crawford's movements, learn his patterns." Ben had been listening from the doorway, his young face set with determination beyond his years. "I want to learn everything, Tall Shadow. I want to protect Ma and the babies like Pa would have." Tall Shadow turned to the boy with approval. "Then your real training begins now, young warrior. No more games. I will teach you as I would teach my own son." Inside the house, one of the babies began to cry. Elena rose wearily, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. "I should feed them." "Go," Tall Shadow said gently. "Care for the little ones. Ben and I will scout the area. Make sure Crawford's men are truly gone and not waiting to spy on us." As Eleanor nursed the babies, she watched through the window as Tall Shadow led Ben around the property, pointing out defensive positions and vulnerable approaches. The boy listened with intense focus, absorbing every word. They looked natural together, the tall Navajo hunter and the small white boy, bound by purpose and growing affection. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When they returned an hour later, Ben was animated with new knowledge. "Tall Shadow showed me where someone could hide to watch the house. He's going to teach me to set warning signals, so we'll know if anyone approaches." "Your son learns quickly," Tall Shadow confirmed. "He has good instincts. In time, he will be able to protect this home." Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" "The arrangement was just until spring, just to save Morning Star, but you're risking so much more now." Tall Shadow was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between Elena, Ben, and the two sleeping babies. "At first, yes, I came only for my daughter's survival. But now," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "now I see a family that needs protection. I see a boy who needs a father's guidance. I see a woman with a warrior's heart who refuses to surrender her home, and—" Elena prompted softly, sensing there was more. "And I see a place where I am not judged by the color of my skin or the ways of my people, where my daughter is loved as your own, where I am valued for what I can teach and provide, not feared or hated." The honesty in his words struck Elena deeply. She realized that their arrangement had evolved far beyond a simple exchange of services. Somewhere in these weeks of shared meals and daily routines, of teaching and learning, they had become something neither had intended. A family built not on blood or tradition, but on mutual need and growing respect. "Tall Shadow," Elena said carefully. "If we're going to face Crawford together, I need to know. Are you prepared for what that might mean? The danger it could bring to you and your people?" His answer was immediate and certain. "I have already chosen my path. Morning Star is all I have left of Singing Rain. You have given my daughter life. Now I will give you and your children safety. This is the way of honor. That evening, as the desert sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, they shared a meal together. The simple act of breaking bread as a family felt both strange and utterly right. Ben peppered Tall Shadow with questions about tracking techniques and animal behavior. The babies lay contentedly in their shared cradle, their small hands touching as they slept. "Tomorrow, I will begin teaching you to shoot properly," Tall Shadow told Elena as they cleaned up after the meal. "If Crawford returns with violence, you must be able to defend yourself and the children." Elena nodded, pushing down her fear of firearms. "I'll learn, whatever it takes to protect them." As darkness fell and Tall Shadow prepared to return to his camp in the canyons, Ben surprised everyone by running to hug the tall hunter. "Thank you for helping us. Thank you for teaching me. I wish you could stay here all the time." Tall Shadow's weathered face softened as he awkwardly returned the boy's embrace. "I'm never far away, young tracker. If you need me, I will come." After Tall Shadow had ridden into the night, Eleanor tucked Ben into bed. "Do you like Tall Shadow, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "I love him, Ma," Ben said simply. "Not like I loved Pa, but different. He makes me feel safe again, like maybe everything will be okay." Elena kissed her son's forehead, her heart full of conflicting emotions. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a big day." Alone in the darkness with only the baby's soft breathing for company, Elena contemplated the impossible situation she found herself in. A widow on the Arizona frontier, nursing a Navajo infant, relying on a native hunter for survival, facing threats from a powerful rancher who wanted her land. But as she looked at the two sleeping babies, so peaceful and content, and remembered the joy on Ben's face as he learned new skills, Elena felt something unexpected: hope. For the first time since David's death, she believed they might actually survive. Not just survive, but thrive. Outside, in the Red Rock Canyons, Tall Shadow sat by a small fire, holding David's compass that Eleanor had returned to him. "I will honor my promise to you, brother," he whispered to the dead man's spirit. "Your family will not fall while I have strength to protect them." The desert night settled around them all, full of dangers both known and unknown, but also full of an unexpected alliance that was growing into something neither Elena nor Tall Shadow had anticipated. Something that might be strong enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. 6 weeks had transformed the Hartley homestead into something that defied easy categorization. The scorching heat of early June bore down on the Arizona territory as Elena stood in the yard, her stance firm and her aim steady as she squeezed the trigger. The rifle crack echoed off the canyon walls, and the tin can she'd been aiming at flew backward off the fence post. Her 4th successful shot in a row. "Better," Tall Shadow said with approval from where he stood watching. "Your breathing is controlled now. You do not flinch before the shot. This is good progress." Elena lowered the rifle, her arms no longer shaking from the weight or the recoil. Daily practice had built both her strength and her confidence. "I never thought I'd be comfortable with a gun. My mother would faint if she saw me now." "Your mother is not here facing what you face," Tall Shadow observed. "Survival changes what we think we cannot do." Ben emerged from the house carrying both babies, one on each hip, with the confident ease of a child who had grown accustomed to the responsibility. Morningstar and Rebecca had become inseparable, their different features mattering not at all to their infant bond. They reached for each other when separated, cried when apart too long, and seemed to communicate in that mysterious language only babies understand. "Ma, they're both hungry again," Ben announced. "And Morningstar needs her cloth changed." Elena set down the rifle and took both babies, settling onto the porch bench to nurse them. This routine had become so natural that she no longer thought twice about it. Morningstar had grown plump and healthy, her dark eyes bright with intelligence and curiosity. Rebecca had thrived with consistent nourishment and the companionship of her milk sister. "I must ride to my people's summer camp today," Tall Shadow announced, his expression troubled. "There are matters I can no longer avoid. I will return before nightfall." Elena looked up sharply, concern flooding through her. "Is something wrong? Are you in trouble because of us?" Tall Shadow's jaw tightened. Some of the younger warriors question my extended absence. They say I have forgotten my people's ways. My presence is required at the council to explain myself. Will they try to stop you from coming back? Ben asked worriedly, setting down the wood he'd been stacking with newfound skill. No one can stop me from honoring my obligations, Tall Shadow said firmly, but Elena heard the uncertainty beneath his words. But I must face their questions with honesty. The time for avoiding this confrontation has passed. Elena wanted to tell him not to go, to stay where it was safe, but she had no right to ask that of him. Their arrangement, whatever it had become, did not give her claim over his choices. Be careful. Come back to us. The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning neither of them had spoken aloud. Tall Shadow held her gaze for a long moment before nodding once and mounting his horse. They watched him ride toward the eastern canyons until he disappeared into the shimmering heat waves. "Ma, will he really come back?" Ben asked quietly, voicing the fear Elena didn't want to acknowledge. "I hope so, sweetheart. I truly hope so." The day passed with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to keep busy with chores, but her eyes kept drifting to the eastern horizon. She taught Ben his letters and numbers, tasks she'd been neglecting in favor of survival skills. The normalcy of education felt strange after weeks focused solely on staying alive. "What's this word, Ma?" Ben asked, pointing to a line in the worn Bible that was one of their few books. "Covenant," Elena read. "It means a sacred promise between people. An agreement that's binding and honorable." Ben considered this seriously, like the promise Tall Shadow made to Pa, to watch over us. Yes, exactly like that. It's a bond that can't be broken lightly. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Eleanor heard the sound of approaching horses, multiple horses. Her heart leapt with hope that Tall Shadow had returned, but the sound was wrong. Too many riders coming too fast. She grabbed the rifle and positioned herself on the porch. Her improved shooting skills suddenly critically important. "Ben, take the babies inside and bar the door," she commanded. Her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Don't come out unless I call for you." "But Ma," Ben protested. "Now," Elena said firmly, and the boy obeyed. Scooping up both babies with practiced efficiency, 6 riders emerged from the heat shimmer, but these weren't Crawford's men. These were U.S. Army cavalry, their blue uniforms dusty from travel, their faces hard with the weariness of frontier duty. The lieutenant leading them couldn't have been more than 25, his clean-shaven face still carrying the softness of Eastern upbringing. "Mrs. Hartley," the lieutenant called out, raising a hand to halt his men at a respectful distance. "I'm Lieutenant James Morrison of Fort Whipple. May we approach?" Elena kept the rifle ready, but lowered slightly. "State your business, Lieutenant." Morrison dismounted, his movements careful and non-threatening. "We've received reports of Indian activity in this area. A lone Navajo man seen repeatedly visiting this homestead. We're investigating to ensure you're not being threatened or harassed." Elena's mind raced. Crawford had made good on his threat to involve the army. "There's been no harassment, Lieutenant. I'm perfectly safe here. With respect, Mom, you might not recognize the danger you're in," Morrison said with the earnest concern of youth. "The Navajo can be cunning. Sometimes they befriend settlers before turning hostile. We've seen it happen." "I appreciate your concern, but it's unnecessary," Elena replied coolly. "I've had no trouble with anyone except settlers who won't take no for an answer about buying my land." One of the soldiers, a grizzled sergeant with decades of frontier experience evident in his weathered face, spat tobacco juice and spoke up. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but we found tracks all around your property. Fresh ones, multiple horses all unshod. That's Indian ponies, sure as sunrise. I'm aware of the tracks, Sergeant. They belong to a friend who's been helping me and my son survive since my husband's death." The words fell like stones into silence. Morrison's young face registered shock, then confusion, then dawning understanding. "Ma'am, are you telling me you've been in contact with a Navajo warrior? Voluntarily?" "I am," Elena said, lifting her chin defiantly. "He's taught my son to hunt and track. He's brought us meat when we had none. He's protected us from those who would take advantage of a widow alone." "Jesus Christ," the sergeant muttered. Lieutenant, we got ourselves a situation here. Morrison's face had gone pale. Mrs. Hartley, I don't think you understand the implications of what you're saying. Fraternizing with hostiles is a serious matter. The army could seize this property, place your children in protective custody. Hostiles. Elena's voice rose with indignation. The only hostile people I've encountered have been white men threatening to take my land by force. The Navajo man you're so concerned about has shown me nothing but honor and respect. Ma'am, they're savages, Morrison said with the absolute certainty of ignorance. They massacre settlers, raid farms, steal children. Whatever story this Indian has told you, whatever promises he's made, you cannot trust him. Elena thought of Tall Shadow's gentle hands holding his daughter, his patient teaching of Ben, his solemn promise to her dying husband. You're wrong, Lieutenant. I trust him more than I trust most white men I've met out here. The sergeant leaned close to Morrison, speaking in a low voice that still carried to Elena's ears. Lieutenant, Crawford paid us good money to come out here and scare this woman. That she was harboring renegades. Seems he told the truth for once. Morrison shot his sergeant a sharp look, clearly uncomfortable with the admission of Crawford's involvement. Sergeant, that's enough. So Crawford sent you, Elena said, pieces falling into place. He couldn't intimidate me himself, so he brought the army to do his dirty work. Mr. Crawford is a respected citizen with legitimate concerns about Indian activity, Morrison said stiffly, his face flushing. But regardless of his motivations, the facts remain. You're consorting with hostiles, Mrs. Hartley. I'm afraid I have to ask you to accompany us back to Fort Whipple until this matter can be investigated properly. I'm not going anywhere, Elena said firmly, raising the rifle again. This is my home. My husband's grave is 50 yards from where we're standing. I have 2 infant children inside who need their mother. I'm not leaving. The soldiers tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. The situation was spiraling toward violence with terrifying speed. Morrison raised his hands placatingly. Mrs. Hartley, please be reasonable. We don't want anyone to get hurt. Then leave my property, Elena said, her finger resting on the trigger. I've broken no laws. I've harmed no one. You have no right to force me from my home. You're aiding enemies of the United States, Morrison countered, his voice hardening. That gives me every right. A new voice cut through the tension like a knife. The only enemies here are those who threaten a woman and children under false pretenses. Tall Shadow materialized from the rocks behind the soldiers with such sudden silence that several of them jumped, reaching for their weapons. He sat his horse calmly, his hands visible and empty, but his presence radiated controlled danger. Behind him, 5 other Navajo warriors emerged from concealment, forming a loose semicircle. "Hold your fire!" Morrison ordered his men sharply, recognizing instantly how badly outnumbered they were. The Navajo had positioned themselves with tactical precision, covering all escape routes. "You are the one who has been visiting this homestead," Morrison said, trying to maintain authority despite the suddenly reversed power dynamic. "I am Tall Shadow of the Diné people," he replied in his deep accented English. "This woman and her children are under my protection. You will not remove them from their home. This is United States territory," Morrison blustered. "You have no authority here. This land belonged to my people long before your maps claimed it," Tall Shadow said quietly. "But I do not speak of ancient rights. I speak of honor and promises made to a dying man. Elena Hartley stays in her home. This is not negotiable." The sergeant assessed the situation with the pragmatism of experience. "Lieutenant, we're outnumbered and outflanked. These boys have us dead to rights if this goes sideways." Morrison's youth warred with his training. He looked at Elena, at Tall Shadow, at his surrounded men. "I could call for reinforcements. Return with a full company?" "You could," Tall Shadow agreed. "And many would die on both sides. For what? To give a greedy rancher the land he covets? To punish a woman for accepting help to survive? Is this the honor of blue-coat soldiers?" Morrison flushed at the accurate characterization. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He could see how Crawford had manipulated him, used the army to fight his personal battles. "Mr. Crawford led me to believe you were holding Mrs. Hartley against her will. Does she look like a prisoner to you?" Tall Shadow gestured toward Eleanor, who stood proud and defiant on her porch, her rifle steady in capable hands. Morrison looked at Elena properly for the first time, seeing not a helpless victim but a strong woman defending her home. "Ma'am, I need to ask you directly, under no duress. Are you here of your own free will? Has this man or his companions threatened or harmed you in any way?" "I'm here completely voluntarily, Lieutenant," Elena said clearly. "Tall Shadow has been nothing but helpful and honorable. He's teaching my son skills necessary for survival out here. He's brought us food when we had none. He's protected us from genuine threats. And the baby?" The sergeant interjected. "We heard crying when we rode up. Sounded like 2 infants. Eleanor hesitated, knowing that the full truth could make things worse. But lies would only complicate an already dangerous situation. "I'm nursing Tall Shadow's daughter alongside my own. His wife died in childbirth. The baby was starving. I had milk. It seemed the Christian thing to do." The soldiers exchanged looks of profound shock. This went far beyond simple trading or friendly relations. This was an intimacy that crossed every social boundary of their world. Morrison looked like he might be sick. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," the sergeant breathed. "Ma'am, do you understand what you're admitting to? The scandal alone—" "I understand perfectly, Sergeant," Elena interrupted. "I understand that I chose to save a baby's life rather than let her die because of the color of her skin. If that's scandalous, then I'll wear the scandal proudly." Tall Shadow's expression softened as he looked at Elena, something unspoken passing between them. One of the warriors behind him spoke in rapid Navajo. Tall Shadow responded briefly, never taking his eyes off the soldiers. Morrison struggled visibly with his duty versus his conscience. "Mrs. Hartley, I can't just ignore this situation. There are regulations, protocols." "Then put in your report that you found a widow living peacefully on her land, bothering no one, being helped by friendly natives," Elena said. "Put in your report that the only threat to my safety comes from Silas Crawford, who wants my land and is willing to use intimidation and false accusations to get it." "The woman speaks truth," Tall Shadow added. "Crawford and his men have threatened her repeatedly. They have promised accidents will happen if she does not sell. Perhaps blue-coat soldiers should investigate those threats instead of harassing those who live in peace." Morrison's face tightened with the realization of how thoroughly he'd been used. "If Crawford has been making threats against a settler, that is a matter for the territorial marshal, not the army." "But you're here now, Lieutenant," Elena pressed. "You've seen the situation with your own eyes. Will you file an honest report, or will you let Crawford continue using the army as his personal enforcers?" The young officer was silent for a long moment, weighing his career against his conscience. Finally, he straightened in his saddle. "Sergeant, we're leaving. Mrs. Hartley is clearly here voluntarily and in no danger from these Navajo—" "Lieutenant, the colonel ain't gonna like—" the sergeant began. "The colonel will receive an accurate report of what we found," Morrison interrupted firmly. "A widow living peacefully on her legal homestead, receiving assistance from friendly natives, and being harassed by a local rancher who used false pretenses to involve the army in a land dispute." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully, her knees weakened. "Thank you, Lieutenant. That's all I ask." "The truth," Morrison nodded, then addressed Tall Shadow. "I can't promise others won't come investigating. Mrs. Hartley's arrangement with you is highly unusual and will cause talk. But I'll do what I can to ensure my report reflects the actual situation. That is all any honorable man can ask of another." Tall Shadow said with a slight incline of his head, a gesture of respect between equals. As the soldiers prepared to depart, Morrison paused. "Mrs. Hartley, a word of advice. Whatever is happening here, whatever you've built with these people, it can't last. Society won't allow it. Eventually, you'll have to choose between your place in the white world and this arrangement." "Choose wisely. I've already made my choice, Lieutenant," Elena said quietly. "The moment I accepted help to save my children, I crossed whatever line society draws." "I won't go back," Morrison nodded slowly, something like admiration in his young eyes. "Then I wish you luck, ma'am. You're going to need it. After the soldiers had ridden away, Tall Shadow and his companions remained until the dust had settled. The other warriors spoke amongst themselves in Navajo, their tones questioning and skeptical. Tall Shadow responded firmly, his voice carrying the weight of decision made and not to be questioned. "Those are my cousins and 2 of my clan brothers," Tall Shadow explained to Elena as he dismounted. "They came to my aid when I said a friend was threatened. Now they want to know why I risk so much for white settlers." "What did you tell them?" Elena asked. "The truth. That I made a sacred promise to a dying man. That you saved my daughter's life when she would have surely perished. That honor requires I protect those under my care." One of the warriors, a man about Tall Shadow's age, with a scar across his cheek, approached Elena directly. He spoke in halting English. "My brother speaks of your courage, says you have a warrior's spirit. I see this is true. Not many women would face soldiers alone." "I wasn't alone," Elena replied. "I had faith that Tall Shadow would come." The scarred warrior looked between Elena and Tall Shadow with knowing eyes. "My brother has found more than duty here, I think. Be careful, both of you. The path you walk has no map, no guide. It will be difficult." After the other Navajo had departed, Tall Shadow helped Elena inside, where Ben had been keeping the babies quiet and calm. The boy's face was pale with worry. "I heard everything, Ma. I was so scared they'd take you away." Elena embraced her son tightly. "They're gone now. We're safe." Tall Shadow made sure of that. "The soldiers will tell others," Tall Shadow said seriously. "Crawford will know his plan failed. He will be angry and more dangerous. We must be more vigilant than ever." As evening fell and they shared a simple meal, the weight of what had happened settled over them. They had crossed a threshold today, publicly acknowledging their arrangement before authorities. There would be consequences. The lieutenant might file an honest report, but others would not be so understanding. "I want to thank your cousins and clan brothers," Elena said. "They risked themselves for us today. They risked themselves for me," Tall Shadow corrected gently. "Because I asked. Because family and clan loyalty demands it. But now they know of you and the children. Now they understand why I spend so much time here, and what do they think of that?" Elena asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Tall Shadow was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "They think I am foolish to involve myself so deeply with settlers. They think I risk bringing trouble to our people. But they also see that Morning Star lives and thrives. They see the honor in keeping a sacred promise. They will not interfere, but neither will they help again, unless the need is dire." Elena nodded, understanding the isolation that came with their choice. "We're on our own, then. Your people don't fully approve, and mine will be scandalized. We have each other," Tall Shadow said simply. "And sometimes that must be enough." Later, after Ben had fallen asleep and both babies were settled, Elena and Tall Shadow sat on the porch in the cooling night air. The stars blazed overhead in the clear desert sky, indifferent to human complications. "Morrison was right about one thing," Elena said softly. "This can't last as it is. Eventually, something will have to change." "What do you want to change?" Tall Shadow asked, his voice carefully neutral. Elena looked at him, this man who had become so essential to her life, to her children's survival, to her happiness. "I don't know. I just know I don't want to lose what we've built here. Whatever that makes me in society's eyes." Tall Shadow reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his larger one. "Whatever comes, we face together. This is my promise. Not just until spring. Not just until Morning Star is grown. But as long as you need me, I am here." Elena's fingers tightened around his, feeling the calluses from years of hunting and survival, the strength that had protected her family, the gentleness that cared for 2 babies, regardless of their different heritage. "And if I need you always?" she whispered. "Then I stay always," Tall Shadow replied. His voice rough with emotion he no longer tried to hide. They sat in silence, hands joined, watching the stars wheel overhead and knowing that the difficult path ahead would only grow more challenging, but committed to walking it together regardless of the cost. The brutal heat of late July pressed down on the Arizona territory like a physical weight. 8 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Lieutenant Morrison, and an uneasy peace had settled over the Hartley homestead. But Elena knew it was the false calm before a storm, the stillness that preceded violence. Crawford had gone quiet, which worried her far more than his open threats ever had. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The babies had grown remarkably in the summer heat. Morning Star, now 7 months old, had begun to sit up on her own, her dark eyes following everything with keen intelligence. Rebecca, only weeks older, had started attempting to crawl, her chubby legs pushing against the woven blanket Elena had spread in the shade. The two girls babbled to each other in their private language, their bond so complete that separating them for even short periods resulted in inconsolable crying from both. Ben had transformed from a frightened boy into a capable young tracker. At 6 years old, he could read animal signs, move silently through brush, and shoot his small bow with impressive accuracy. More importantly, Tall Shadow had taught him defensive strategies, how to recognize danger, how to position himself for best advantage. The boy had become a small warrior, standing guard over his family with fierce devotion. Elena stood at the creek, washing clothes in the early morning coolness, when she heard Ben's warning whistle. 3 short bursts, the signal for unknown riders approaching. Her heart jumped as she quickly gathered the wet laundry and hurried back toward the house. Tall Shadow emerged from the small barn he'd helped build, his rifle already in hand, his face set in hard lines. "How many?" Elena asked as she reached the porch where Ben stood watching the eastern trail. "2 riders, Ma, but they're not coming fast like they're attacking. Moving slow and careful," Ben reported. His young voice steady despite the tension. Tall Shadow studied the approaching figures through the heat shimmer. Not Crawford's men. One rides like a woman. As the riders drew closer, Elena gasped in recognition. The woman was Sarah Henderson, wife of the blacksmith from Prescott, the nearest settlement 3 days' ride away. The man beside her was Doc Brennan, the circuit doctor who traveled between the scattered frontier communities. Their presence here so far from town could mean nothing good. "Mrs. Henderson? Doc Brennan?" Elena called out as they approached, lowering her rifle but keeping it close. "What brings you all this way?" Sarah Henderson was a sturdy woman in her 40s, known for her practical nature and kind heart. She dismounted stiffly, her face grave with the weight of bad news. "Elena, we need to talk. May we come in out of this infernal heat?" Elena glanced at Tall Shadow, who nodded slightly and moved to take the horses. The gesture was so domestic, so natural, that Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. But she said nothing, following Eleanor into the adobe house. Inside, the 2 babies lay in their shared cradle, Morning Star's copper hand wrapped around Rebecca's pale fingers as they napped. Sarah stopped short at the sight, her face registering shock. "Dear God, the rumors are true then. You're actually nursing a Navajo child. Her name is Morning Star," Elena said firmly, moving protectively toward the cradle. "And yes, I'm nursing her. Her mother died in childbirth. Would you have me let an infant starve?" Doc Brennan, a weathered man in his 60s who'd seen every hardship the frontier could offer, spoke gently. "No one's judging you for saving a baby's life, Elena, but you need to understand the situation you've created." "What situation?" Elena asked, though dread pooled in her stomach. Sarah settled heavily into a chair, accepting the water Elena offered. After Lieutenant Morrison filed his report, word spread through the territory like wildfire. A white widow living with a Navajo warrior, nursing his child, letting him teach her son. "Elena, people are calling it everything from scandalous to treasonous." "I don't care what people call it," Elena said, her voice harder than she felt. "Tall Shadow saved my family. He's been honorable in every way." "I believe you," Sarah said quickly. "Tom and I both do. That's why we rode out here to warn you. Silas Crawford is using the scandal to his advantage. He's been to the territorial governor, claiming you've been compromised by the Navajo, that you're unfit to maintain a homestead." that the land should be seized for public safety. Eleanor felt the floor shift beneath her feet. He can't do that. This is my legal property. My husband's grave is here. Doc Brennan shook his head sadly. In normal circumstances, you'd be right. But these aren't normal circumstances. A white woman openly cohabitating with a native man, raising children together, regardless of their different races. This challenges every social norm. Crawford's found judges and officials willing to listen because, frankly, what you're doing terrifies them. We're not cohabitating, Eleanor protested. Tall Shadow camps in the canyons. He comes during the day to hunt and teach Ben, and stays through meals, through evenings, helps with construction and farming, Sarah said gently. Elena, I'm not condemning you, but from the outside, to people who don't know the full story, it looks like you've taken a Navajo husband. The words hung in the air, impossible to deny completely because there was truth in them. Over these months, Tall Shadow had become far more than a friend or helper. He was a partner in every meaningful way, except the legal and physical. They raised children together, made decisions together, protected each other. If that wasn't a form of marriage, what was it? What does Crawford want? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He's filed a claim with the territorial court, Doc Brennan explained. Says the land is abandoned in practical terms, since there's no legal male head of household. Says you've forfeited your rights by consorting with hostiles. The hearing is set for 2 weeks from now in Prescott. 2 weeks? Eleanor's mind raced. That's not enough time to prepare a defense. That's the point, Sarah said bitterly. Crawford's rushing it through before you can mount a proper response. He's got the judge in his pocket and public opinion on his side. The scandal makes you an easy target. Tall Shadow had entered silently during this conversation, standing in the doorway like a sentinel. Then we fight, he said simply. We go to this hearing. We speak the truth. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and concern. Mr. Tall Shadow, your presence at the hearing would make things worse. A Navajo man defending a white woman's honor. It would confirm every suspicion Crawford is spreading, so I am to hide while Elena faces this alone. Tall Shadow's voice carried controlled fury. This is not acceptable. It's the reality of the situation, Doc Brennan said with weary honesty. I don't like it any more than you do, but frontier justice is rough and prejudiced. Your testimony would hurt more than help. Eleanor felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. So what am I supposed to do? Stand before a judge and pretend Tall Shadow hasn't been essential to our survival? Lie about Morningstar? Deny the truth of our arrangement? You tell your story, Sarah said firmly, reaching across to squeeze Elena's hand. You tell them about David's death, about being left alone with 2 children, about facing starvation. You tell them about a man who honored a promise to a dying husband. You emphasize the Christian charity of saving an infant's life, and leave out the parts that sound too much like a marriage, Doc Brennan added pragmatically. Leave out the growing affection, the partnership, the fact that he's become father to your son, and you've become mother to his daughter. Keep it purely transactional. Survival, charity, temporary arrangement. But that's a lie, Elena protested. It's so much more than that now. Then you'll lose, Sarah said bluntly. And Crawford will get your land, and you'll be forced to leave, and you'll never see Tall Shadow again because they'll make sure of it. Is your pride worth that? The question struck Elena like a physical blow. Was her pride worth losing everything? Worth never seeing Tall Shadow again? Worth separating Morningstar from the only mother she'd known? Worth destroying the family they'd built against all odds? I will not hide, Tall Shadow said again, his voice like stone. If my presence harms Elena's case, then I will speak in her favor regardless. Honor demands it. Honor demands you protect your daughter, Eleanor said sharply, turning to face him. If I lose the hearing, if I'm forced to leave, what happens to Morningstar? She needs to nurse for months yet. If we're separated, she suffers. Is your pride worth that? Tall Shadow's face showed the agony of impossible choices. You ask me to abandon you when you need me most. I'm asking you to trust me to fight this battle while you protect our daughters, Eleanor said, the plural slipping out naturally. Both of them need us, thinking clearly, not acting on emotion. Ben had been listening from his corner, his young face tight with fear. "Are they going to take our home, Ma? Make us leave?" Elena knelt before her son, taking his small face in her hands. "I'm going to fight with everything I have to keep our home. But Ben, you need to be brave. If things go wrong, if we have to leave, you need to be strong for your sisters." "Both my sisters?" Ben asked, looking toward the cradle where Morningstar and Rebecca slept peacefully. "Even Morningstar?" "Especially Morningstar," Elena said, fresh tears threatening. "Because she'll need us more than ever." Sarah stood, preparing to leave. "We've said what we came to say. Tom and I will testify on your behalf at the hearing. We'll tell them how David spoke well of you, how you've maintained the property properly, how you've done nothing but try to survive." "Thank you," Elena whispered. "Both of you, for riding all this way to warn me." After the visitors had departed, Elena and Tall Shadow stood on the porch, watching the heat shimmer obscure Sarah and Doc Brennan's forms in the distance. The weight of what was coming pressed down on them both. "I should take Morningstar and leave," Tall Shadow said quietly. "If I'm not here, if there is no scandal, perhaps Crawford loses his leverage, and Morningstar loses the mother who's fed her for 7 months, Elena countered. "She'll think I abandoned her. The trauma could affect her for life. Better alive and traumatized than dead from starvation," Tall Shadow said harshly. "I cannot let my pride or my feelings endanger my daughter." Elena turned to face him fully. "What feelings? Say it plainly, Tall Shadow. What are we to each other?" The question had been building for weeks, unspoken but present in every shared glance, every casual touch, every moment of domestic partnership. Tall Shadow met her eyes, his dark gaze intense. "You are the woman who saved my daughter's life. The woman who honors my dead wife by caring for her child. The woman who shows courage and strength every day. The woman I think of when I wake and before I sleep." His voice grew rougher. "The woman I have come to love, though I have no right to such feelings." Elena's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this truth for months, but hearing it spoken aloud changed everything. "You have every right to your feelings, as I have right to mine. I love you, Tall Shadow. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to betray David's memory. But my heart chose you anyway." Tall Shadow reached for her hands, holding them carefully as if they were precious and fragile. "If we speak these truths, if we acknowledge what is between us, we make everything more complicated. Society will judge us more harshly. Society already judges us," Elena said. "We might as well deserve their judgment." "What are you saying?" Tall Shadow asked, hope and fear warring in his expression. Before Elena could answer, Ben called out from inside. "Ma, the babies are awake and hungry." The moment broke, reality reasserting itself. They had children to care for, a hearing to prepare for, survival to maintain. Personal feelings, no matter how powerful, had to wait. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena prepared her defense with meticulous care. She organized documents proving her legal ownership of the land, letters from David establishing his wishes for his family, records of taxes paid and improvements made. Sarah sent messages with supportive testimony from several Prescott families. Even Lieutenant Morrison sent a letter affirming that he'd found Elena living peacefully and voluntarily. Tall Shadow taught Ben everything he could, as if trying to compress years of learning into days. The boy absorbed it all with desperate intensity, understanding without being told that this might be their last time together. In the evenings, Elena nursed both babies, memorizing every detail of Morningstar's face, storing up memories against possible separation. 3 days before the hearing, Tall Shadow's scarred cousin returned with grave news. Crawford's men have been seen meeting with renegade warriors, outcasts from various tribes, he reported in careful English for Elena's benefit. They offer weapons and whiskey in exchange for a raid on this homestead. He's hiring native raiders to attack me, Elena asked in horror. Why? Because if you are killed by hostile Indians, your land escates to the territory, Tall Shadow said grimly. Crawford can then purchase it legitimately. and the scandal of your relationship with me becomes proof that you endangered yourself through poor judgment. When? Elena demanded. When will they attack? Unknown, but likely before the hearing. If you are dead, there is no case to fight, the scarred warrior said bluntly. That night, Tall Shadow did not return to his camp in the canyons. He remained at the homestead, armed and vigilant. His cousin and 2 other warriors took positions in the rocks, forming a defensive perimeter. Inside, Elena tried to keep the children calm, despite the palpable tension. Tell me a story, Ma, Ben asked, his voice small and frightened. Like you used to before Pa died. Eleanor held her son close, both babies drowsing on a blanket nearby, and began to speak. Once upon a time, there was a brave widow who lived on the frontier with her children. When times grew dark and dangerous, an unexpected friend arrived to help them. Together, they proved that courage and love could overcome even the deepest prejudices. Does the story have a happy ending? Ben interrupted. Elena looked at Tall Shadow, standing guard by the window, his profile strong against the lamplight. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're still writing that part. The attack came at midnight. 6 raiders on horseback, drunk on whiskey and promised payment, charging the homestead with rifles and torches. But Tall Shadow and his warriors were ready. The defense was swift and brutal. Warning shots turned to deadly aim when the raiders refused to retreat. Within minutes, 3 attackers lay dead. 2 fled into the darkness, and 1 was wounded and captured. Elena had hustled the children into the root cellar at the first sound of gunfire. Her own rifle ready should anyone breach their defenses. The silence after the shooting was somehow worse than the noise, every second an agony of not knowing who had survived. Elena, it is safe. Tall Shadow's voice finally called, and she nearly collapsed with relief. The captured raider, wounded in the shoulder and terrified, confessed everything. Crawford had paid them $50 each to kill Elena and make it look like a random native attack. He'd promised them whiskey and immunity from prosecution. The man's testimony, combined with physical evidence, would destroy Crawford's case, but it also meant open warfare now. Crawford would know his plan had failed, would know that Elena had powerful protection. The hearing in 3 days would become even more crucial, even more dangerous. As dawn broke over the Arizona desert, Elena surveyed the aftermath. 3 bodies wrapped for burial, blood on the ground, bullet holes in the walls of her home. Her sanctuary had become a battlefield, but they had survived. They had proof of Crawford's treachery, and they had each other. Tall Shadow found her standing in the wreckage of her garden, trampled by raiders' horses. We must tell the authorities what happened here. Crawford's crimes are now beyond civil land disputes. This is attempted murder. Will they believe us? Elena asked wearily. Or will they say we killed innocent men and concocted a story? The wounded man's testimony will support us, and Lieutenant Morrison will investigate honestly, I believe, Tall Shadow said. This changes everything. Crawford has revealed himself as lawless and dangerous. Elena turned to him, seeing the blood on his shirt, the weariness in his face, the determination in his eyes. I'm so tired of fighting, of defending my right to live in peace, to care for children, to accept help from a good man. When does it end? Tall Shadow pulled her close, his arms strong and certain around her. It ends when we decide we will not be moved. When we stand before their court and their judgment and say, we are not ashamed. When we claim what is ours by right of survival and love. And if we lose, Elena whispered against his chest, then we start again somewhere else, together, as a family, as we were always meant to be, Tall Shadow said simply. 3 days later, as they prepared to ride to Prescott for the hearing, Elena dressed in her best remaining clothes, faded but clean. Ben wore his father's old vest, adjusted to fit his small frame, and in a cradle board beautifully crafted by Tall Shadow, Morning Star and Rebecca rode together, their different features and shared bond, a living testimony to the family they'd become. Whatever happens today, Eleanor told Tall Shadow as they prepared to leave, I want you to know I don't regret any of it. Every choice, every risk, every moment has been worth it, as have all my choices, Tall Shadow agreed. Now we go and finish what Crawford started. We end this, one way or another, as they rode toward Prescott, toward judgment and justice, toward an uncertain future. Elena felt an unexpected peace settle over her. They had survived winter, starvation, threats and violence. They had built something precious and rare in a harsh land. Whatever the court decided, no one could take that away. The town of Prescott buzzed with anticipation as Elena Hartley's wagon rolled down the dusty main street. Word of the hearing had spread throughout the territory, drawing curious onlookers from surrounding settlements. Some came to witness scandal, others to see justice served, but all came to watch a frontier drama unlike any they'd seen before. The wooden courthouse stood at the center of town, its freshly painted exterior a symbol of civilization's tenuous grip on this wild land. Elena sat tall on the wagon seat, her chin lifted despite the stares and whispers that followed her progress. Ben sat beside her, his small hand gripping hers tightly. In the back, Sarah Henderson rode with both babies, shielding them from the August sun and the hostile glances. Tall Shadow had kept his word, remaining behind at the homestead with his warriors, though Elena felt his absence like a physical ache. The captured raider's confession had reached Prescott 2 days earlier, carried by Lieutenant Morrison himself. The young officer had investigated the attack thoroughly, documenting Crawford's payment to the raiders, gathering testimony from the wounded man, examining the evidence. His report had transformed the hearing from a simple land dispute into a criminal investigation. But Crawford was a powerful man with deep pockets and deeper connections. The outcome remained uncertain. Judge Harold Blackwood presided over the territorial court, a stern man in his 60s, known for harsh sentences and little mercy. He'd built his reputation on maintaining order in lawless territory, which often meant favoring established power over individual rights. As Eleanor entered the packed courtroom, his cold grey eyes assessed her with obvious disapproval. "All rise for the Honourable Judge Blackwood," the bailiff announced. Though most were already standing, craning for better views of the proceedings, Silas Crawford sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a slick man named Garrison Wells, imported from San Francisco specifically for this case. Crawford's face showed carefully controlled anger, but his eyes burned with hatred as they fixed on Elena. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "Not after everything she'd survived. We are here to address the matter of Crawford versus Hartley regarding disputed land claims and allegations of misconduct," Judge Blackwood began, his voice carrying easily through the silent courtroom. "Mr. Wells, you may present your opening statement." Garrison Wells rose smoothly, his expensive suit and polished manner a stark contrast to the rough frontier crowd. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about the rule of law and social order. Mrs. Elena Hartley, through her reckless and immoral conduct, has forfeited her right to maintain a homestead in United States territory. She has consorted with hostile natives, specifically harboring a Navajo warrior known as Tall Shadow. She has nursed a Navajo infant, blurring the sacred lines between races that God and nature have established." "Objection," a new voice rang out. And Elena turned in shock to see a distinguished man in his 50s standing at the back of the courtroom. He wore a proper suit and carried himself with unmistakable authority. "Your Honor, I'm Marcus Brennan, attorney from Tucson, here to represent Mrs. Hartley. I apologize for my late arrival, but the territorial roads are in deplorable condition." Judge Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "Mrs. Hartley has retained counsel. This is the first I'm hearing of it. My brother, Dr. Brennan, sent for me when he learned of Mrs. Hartley's situation," Marcus explained, moving forward confidently. "I've reviewed the case materials and Lieutenant Morrison's recent report. This hearing needs significant reconsideration, given the new evidence of criminal conspiracy." Crawford's face went pale, then red with rage. Wells scrambled to respond. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The hearing was scheduled weeks ago, as was the attack on my client's homestead, orchestrated by your client, Marcus Brennan countered sharply. An attack documented by the United States Army with multiple witnesses and a confession from a surviving raider. Your Honor, this is not a civil land dispute. This is attempted murder disguised as legal proceedings. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Blackwood slammed his gavel repeatedly. Order! I will have order! He fixed Marcus with a stern glare. You're making serious accusations, Counselor. I assume you have evidence? Extensive evidence, Your Honor, Marcus replied, producing a thick folder. Lieutenant Morrison's complete report, including the confession of Raider Thomas Red Maloney, who explicitly states that Silas Crawford paid him and 5 others $50 each to kill Mrs. Hartley and make it appear to be a random native attack. There are also sworn statements from 3 surviving Navajo warriors who defended the homestead. Navajo testimony is inadmissible, Wells objected quickly. They're not citizens and have no standing in American courts. But the testimony of a United States Army officer is admissible, Marcus shot back, as is the physical evidence Lieutenant Morrison collected, including the payoff money found on the dead raiders, marked with Mr. Crawford's ranch brand. Crawford leaped to his feet. That's a damn lie. Those savages planted that evidence. Mr. Crawford, sit down and be silent, or I'll hold you in contempt, Judge Blackwood ordered, his face grave. This hearing had taken a turn he clearly hadn't anticipated. Mr. Wells, does your client wish to address these allegations? Wells conferred hastily with Crawford in urgent whispers. Elena watched the attorney's face grow increasingly dismayed as he realized the trap his client had walked into. Finally, Wells stood. Your Honor, my client categorically denies any involvement in violence against Mrs. Hartley. These allegations are clearly fabrications designed to deflect from her own misconduct. Then perhaps we should examine that alleged misconduct, Marcus Brennan said smoothly. Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Mrs. Sarah Henderson. Sarah took the stand with calm dignity, placing her hand on the Bible for her oath. Under Marcus's gentle questioning, she described Elena's situation after David's death, the desperate winter, the starving children. She spoke of Tall Shadow's honorable conduct, his provision of food, his teaching of Ben, his protection against genuine threats. And the Navajo infant, Marcus asked. Why did Mrs. Hartley agree to nurse this child? Because she's a Christian woman who couldn't bear to watch a baby starve, Sarah said firmly. Morningstar was dying. Her mother had died in childbirth. What decent person would refuse to help? Wells cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Elena's actions as inappropriate and scandalous, but Sarah held firm. I've known Elena Hartley for 3 years. She's a good woman, a devoted mother, and a person of strong moral character. Nothing she's done deserves condemnation. Everything deserves admiration. Marcus called witness after witness. Doc Brennan testified to Elena's good character and the medical necessity of nursing Morningstar. Tom Henderson, the blacksmith, spoke of David Hartley's dying words to Tall Shadow, establishing the sacred promise that had initiated the arrangement. Even some of Crawford's own ranch hands, subpoenaed by Marcus, reluctantly admitted they'd heard their boss planning to drive Elena off her land by any means necessary. The testimony that shifted everything came from Lieutenant Morrison himself. The young officer described his investigation with precise military detail, presenting evidence of Crawford's payments to the raiders, the wounded raiders' confession, the defensive nature of the shooting at Elena's homestead. Lieutenant, in your professional military judgment, was Mrs. Hartley acting in legitimate self-defense? Marcus asked. Absolutely, Morrison replied. She and her defenders were facing 6 armed men attempting to murder her and her children. The response was proportionate and justified. And what is your assessment of the Navajo man called Tall Shadow? Marcus continued. Morrison paused, clearly uncomfortable but committed to honesty. He conducted himself with honor. He kept his word to a dying man. He protected innocent children. I don't agree with all aspects of their arrangement, but I cannot fault his character or his actions. Wells tried desperately to undermine Morrison's testimony, but the officer's military bearing and obvious integrity made him unshakable. By the time Morrison stepped down, the mood in the courtroom had shifted noticeably. Elena was no longer a scandalous woman consorting with savages. She was a widow, defending her home against a powerful man's criminal conspiracy. Judge Blackwood called a recess, and Eleanor stepped outside into the blazing afternoon heat, then clung to her side while Sarah rocked both babies, who were growing fussy in the oppressive courthouse atmosphere. Marcus Brennan joined them, his expression cautiously optimistic. "You didn't tell me you'd hired an attorney," Elena said, still somewhat shocked by his appearance. "Because I didn't hire him," Elena admitted. "I couldn't afford a lawyer," Marcus smiled. "My brother wrote to me about your situation. What you did for that baby, the courage you've shown. It reminded me why I became a lawyer. Some cases are worth taking regardless of payment. This is one of them. What happens now?" Elena asked, watching Crawford through the courthouse window. The rancher's face twisted with rage as he argued with his attorney. "Now Judge Blackwood has to decide if he's a man of law or a man of politics," Marcus said seriously. "The evidence of Crawford's crimes is overwhelming. But Crawford has influence, and you've still broken social conventions. The judge could rule either way." When court reconvened, Judge Blackwood's face was unreadable as he surveyed the packed courtroom. "I've considered all testimony and evidence presented today. This case has proven far more complex than initially appeared." Eleanor held her breath, Ben's small hand squeezing hers painfully tight. "First, regarding the attempted murder charges," Blackwood continued, "Lieutenant Morrison's investigation is thorough and damning. Mr. Crawford, I'm ordering you to stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder. Bail is set at $5,000, and you are prohibited from approaching Mrs. Hartley or her property." The courtroom exploded in shocked conversation. Crawford looked like he might have a stroke, his face purple with fury. Wells tried to object, but Blackwood overrode him. "As for the land dispute," the judge continued, and Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. "Mrs. Hartley holds legal title to the homestead, purchased and improved by her husband. She has maintained the property and paid all required taxes. There is no legal basis for seizure." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully her knees buckled. Sarah caught her arm, steadying her as tears streamed down her face. "However," Blackwood added, and Elena's relief froze into new fear, "there remains the matter of Mrs. Hartley's arrangement with the Navajo warrior Tall Shadow. While I find no criminal conduct, the relationship challenges accepted social norms and could create problems for the community." "Your Honor," Marcus Brennan stood quickly, "my client's private arrangements on her own property are not subject to community approval. She has broken no laws." "I'm aware of that, Counselor," Blackwood interrupted, "which is why I'm not ruling against her. I'm simply noting that frontier life requires certain accommodations to survival that more civilized society might not understand. Mrs. Hartley has done what she needed to survive and protect her children. The court finds no fault in that. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was enough. Elena had won. The land was hers. Crawford faced criminal charges. She was free to return home and continue living as she chose. As the courtroom cleared, Crawford had to be physically restrained by the sheriff's deputies from approaching Elena. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll appeal. I'll fight this until—" "You'll do nothing," Judge Blackwood said coldly, "except sit in a jail cell until your trial. Any further threats against Mrs. Hartley will result in additional charges. Take him away." Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered, some hostile but others surprisingly supportive. An older woman approached Elena cautiously. "Mrs. Hartley, I just wanted to say I think what you did was brave. My own sister died in childbirth last year, and the baby didn't survive. If someone had been able to help, like you helped that Navajo baby, well, it would have been a blessing." Others came forward with similar sentiments. Not everyone approved, but many understood survival, understood loss, understood the harsh choices frontier life demanded. Elena felt hope stirring in her chest. Perhaps there was a place for her unusual family in this world after all. The journey back to the homestead took 2 days. As they crested the final ridge overlooking her property, Eleanor saw a tall shadow standing in the yard, watching the eastern trail. He'd been waiting. When he caught sight of them, he moved forward with barely contained emotion. Elena jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped, running to meet him. They collided in an embrace that felt like coming home, like safety, like love finally acknowledged without shame or hiding. "We won," she said breathlessly. "The land is ours. Crawford's going to jail." "We won." Tall Shadow held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "I knew you would be victorious. You have the heart of a warrior and the spirit of the eagle." Ben launched himself at Tall Shadow, who caught the boy with one arm while keeping the other around Elena. "I was so scared they'd take Ma away. But Mr. Marcus was amazing. He destroyed all of Crawford's lies." The Navajo warriors, who'd been keeping watch, emerged from the rocks, their normally stoic faces showing relief and approval. Tall Shadow's scarred cousin approached, speaking in rapid Navajo. Tall Shadow responded, then translated for Elena. "He says the spirits have smiled upon us, that we have walked a difficult path with honor." That evening, they gathered for a meal that felt like a celebration. Sarah and Doc Brennan had accompanied them back to help with the journey, and now they sat around Elena's table, sharing food and stories. The babies played on a blanket, Morning Star and Rebecca babbling happily to each other. Ben demonstrated his tracking skills for Doc Brennan, who praised the boy's knowledge enthusiastically. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in brilliant oranges and purples, Sarah pulled Elena aside. "So what happens now? You and Tall Shadow, I mean. You've won the legal battle, but the social one continues." Elena watched Tall Shadow across the yard, teaching Ben to identify evening bird calls. "I don't know exactly, but I know we're a family now, in every way that matters. Morning Star is as much my daughter as Rebecca. Ben loves Tall Shadow like a father. And I—" She paused, letting herself acknowledge the full truth. "I love him completely, not despite our differences, but perhaps because of them. He's shown me strength I didn't know I possessed." "People will talk," Sarah warned gently. "They'll judge and gossip and make your life difficult." "Let them," Elena said with newfound confidence. "We've survived Crawford's violence and the law's scrutiny. We can survive small-minded gossip. This is our home, our family, our life. We'll live it on our terms." After their guests had departed the next morning, Elena and Tall Shadow finally found time to talk privately. They walked to the creek where Elena had first truly begun to trust him, where so many quiet conversations had built their bond. "The court has given us freedom to continue as we are," Tall Shadow said carefully. "But I would ask for more if you are willing." Eleanor's heart raced. "What are you asking?" "In my people's way, a man and woman who choose each other speak vows before the clan. They commit to walk the path of life together, to raise children as one, to face all challenges side by side." Tall Shadow took her hands in his. "In your people's way, there are different ceremonies, different words, but the meaning is the same. Elena Hartley, will you join your life to mine? Will you be my wife in all the ways that matter?" Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, in every way, in both our traditions, in any way that makes it real. I choose you, Tall Shadow. I choose this family we've built." They married twice in the following weeks. First in a Navajo ceremony performed by Tall Shadow's clan, with Elena learning the traditional words and wearing a beautiful woven dress created by Tall Shadow's relatives. Ben stood proudly beside them, while both babies were blessed by the clan's medicine woman. The ceremony spoke of two paths becoming one, of strength in unity, of children raised in two worlds with the gifts of both. The second ceremony happened in Elena's yard, performed by a traveling Methodist preacher who'd heard their story and felt moved to help. Doc Brennan and Sarah stood as witnesses, along with several families from Prescott who had come to support Elena. The preacher spoke of love that transcends boundaries, of faith that builds bridges, of the holy work of raising children in kindness regardless of origin. Neither ceremony was entirely conventional. Neither would be recognized by all of society, but both were real and binding in the ways that mattered to Elena and Tall Shadow. A year passed, marked by seasons of growth and challenge. Crawford's trial ended in conviction and a long prison sentence. The homestead expanded with new buildings and better fencing. Ben grew into a confident young boy, fluent in both English and Navajo, comfortable in both worlds. The babies became toddlers, Morning Star and Rebecca inseparable as they learned to walk and talk, calling both Elena and Tall Shadow by parental names without distinction. More families in the territory began to accept their unusual arrangement, some even seeking Tall Shadow's expertise in hunting and tracking, paying him fairly for his knowledge. Elena became known not as a scandal, but as a survivor. A woman who had chosen love and family over convention on a cool autumn evening. As the family gathered around their table for the evening meal, Elena looked at the faces surrounding her. Tall Shadow, his weathered features softened by contentment. Ben, animated as he described his day's tracking lessons. Morning Star and Rebecca, giggling together over some private baby joke. This family that defied categories and challenged norms, this family built on survival and choice and profound love. "What are you thinking?" Tall Shadow asked, catching her reflective expression. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," Elena said softly. "A year and a half ago, I was alone and desperate, watching my children starve, facing an impossible winter. And now look at us, we have built something good," Tall Shadow agreed. "Something that honors those who came before, while creating new possibilities for those who come after. Pa would have liked you," Ben announced suddenly. "I think about that sometimes. I think he's glad you're taking care of us." Tall Shadow reached across to ruffle the boy's hair affectionately. "Your father was a man of honor. I try every day to live up to the trust he placed in me." As darkness fell and the children were settled for sleep, Elena and Tall Shadow stood together on their porch, watching stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. The same stars that had witnessed their first unlikely meeting, their gradual trust, their growing love, their defiance of convention. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked quietly. "Leaving your people's ways to build this life with us?" "I have not left my people's ways," Tall Shadow corrected gently. "I have expanded them, just as you have expanded yours. We are not white or Navajo. We are something new, something the world is not quite ready for, but needs nonetheless." Elena leaned into his solid warmth, feeling absolutely certain of her choices. "I love you, not despite the difficulties or because of some dramatic rescue, but because of who you are, who you've helped me become, the family we've created together. And I love you," Tall Shadow replied, his arms encircling her. "My unexpected gift, my fierce warrior woman, the mother of my children and the keeper of my heart." Inside the house, Morning Star's sleepy voice called out for Mama. Without thinking, both Elena and Tall Shadow moved to respond, their partnership so complete that they thought and acted as one. They found both girls awake in their shared bed, Rebecca's pale hand holding Morning Star's darker one as always. "We just wanted to say good night again," Rebecca announced in her small voice, "and tell you we love you." Morning Star added, her English now as fluent as the Navajo she spoke with her father. Elena and Tall Shadow tucked both daughters in again, speaking soft words in two languages, blessing them in two traditions, loving them with the wholeness of two hearts that had found each other against impossible odds. Later, as they prepared for sleep themselves, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The grief and desperation, the unlikely alliance, the gradual transformation of necessity into choice, of cooperation into love. They had faced violence and prejudice, legal challenges and social condemnation. They had survived it all by refusing to be anything other than what they were, a family built on honor, respect and profound commitment. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Elena asked as they lay in the darkness. "More challenges, certainly," Tall Shadow replied honestly. "The world changes slowly, but we have proven we can face anything together, and our children will grow up knowing that love and family transcend the boundaries others create." That is a powerful gift to give them. Thank you, Elena whispered, for keeping your promise to David, for saving us all. You saved me as well, Tall Shadow said softly. You gave my daughter life. You gave me purpose again after singing Rain's death. You taught me that families can be built, not just born. The debt is equal, the gift shared. Outside, the Arizona night settled over the homestead with its desert sounds and star-bright beauty. Inside, a family slept peacefully, each member saved by the others, each one necessary to the whole. A family that should not have existed by the rules of their time. But that proved love and survival could write new rules entirely. And in the years that followed, as children grew and the homestead prospered, as more families learned to cross boundaries of race and culture, the story of Elena Hartley and Tall Shadow became legend. Not a scandal to be whispered about, but an inspiration. Proof that on the harsh frontier, where survival demanded everything, sometimes the most courageous choice was to love beyond limits, to build family beyond convention, and to create home wherever hearts were brave enough to claim it. 5 years had passed since the hearing in Prescott, and the Hartley homestead had transformed into something the original settlers could never have imagined. The small adobe house had grown into a proper ranch with additional rooms, a large barn, and corrals that housed horses trained by Tall Shadow, using methods passed down through generations of his people. The property had become a place where two worlds intersected. Creating something entirely unique in the Arizona territory, Elena stood in her expanded garden, now lush with both traditional crops and native plants that Tall Shadow had introduced. At 32, she had grown into a woman of remarkable strength, her hands calloused from work, but her spirit unbroken by the years of struggle. Her hair, pulled back in a practical braid, showed a few premature grey strands, badges of honor from the difficulties she'd overcome. "Ma!" "Morning Star took my tracking stick again," Rebecca's voice called from the yard, indignant but not truly angry. At 6 years old, Rebecca had grown into a spirited child, with her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart. Her sun-lightened hair contrasted sharply with her milk sister's dark braids, but their bond remained as inseparable as when they'd nursed side by side. "I only borrowed it because mine broke," Morningstar protested in perfect English. Though she could switch to Navajo with equal fluency, she had her father's serious eyes and her mother's beauty, growing into a child who moved comfortably between two cultures. "Besides, you said I could use anything of yours. Girls, there's enough drama without you two adding to it," Elena called with amused exasperation. "Rebecca, share your things," Morningstar asked before borrowing. "How many times must we repeat this?" Ben appeared from the barn, now 11 years old and nearly as tall as Elena. He'd grown into a capable young man, his skills as a tracker and hunter rivaling those of boys twice his age. More importantly, he'd developed a wisdom beyond his years, understanding the delicate balance their family maintained between two worlds. "Pa says the Henderson family will be here by noon. Should I prepare extra supplies for their journey?" Elena smiled at hearing Ben call Tall Shadow Pa so naturally. The boy barely remembered his birth father now, though they kept David's memory alive through stories and the silver compass that Ben now carried. "Yes, and make sure the guest room is ready. Sarah mentioned they might stay overnight." The sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. 3 riders emerged from the canyon trail, but these weren't visitors. They were family. Tall Shadow rode in front, his bearing still proud despite the grey now streaking his long hair. Behind him came his scarred cousin, now a frequent visitor and trusted friend. The 3rd rider was a surprise, a young Navajo woman Elena didn't recognize. Tall Shadow dismounted with the fluid grace that age had not diminished, immediately moving to embrace Elena. Their greeting was comfortable and affectionate, the ease of people who had built a life together through choice and commitment. "We have brought a guest," he announced. "This is Bright Moon, daughter of my clan brother. She wishes to learn English and the ways of living between both worlds. I told her there is no better teacher than you." Eleanor studied the shy young woman, seeing in her eyes the same uncertainty she herself had felt years ago when faced with the unknown. "You are welcome here, Bright Moon. We have much to teach each other." Inside the expanded house, Elena had created a space that honored both her heritage and tall shadows. Navajo weavings hung beside framed photographs. Traditional tools rested near English books. The home was a physical representation of their blended life, neither purely white nor purely native, but something new and vital. "Tell me true," Elena said to Tall Shadow as they prepared the midday meal. "How are things with your people? You've been to the summer camp more frequently these past months." Tall Shadow's expression grew troubled. "The blue coats push harder for the Diné to move to reservations. They speak of peace but offer confinement. Many young warriors grow restless and angry. They see families like ours as betrayal, as giving up our ways. And what do the elders say?" Elena asked, her heart heavy with concern for the struggles his people faced. "The elders are divided. Some see adaptation as survival. Others see it as surrender." Tall Shadow paused, choosing his words carefully. "My cousin argues that what we have built here proves both peoples can live in respect. But it is a hard argument to make when the government shows so little respect." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Henderson family. Zara had aged gracefully, her hair now completely grey, but her spirit as strong as ever. Tom walked with a slight limp from an accident in his forge, but his smile was warm as he greeted them. Behind them rode their son, Michael, now 17 and clearly smitten with the pretty young Bright Moon. The afternoon passed in comfortable conversation and shared work. Sarah helped Elena prepare food, while Tom and Tall Shadow discussed horse training. The children played elaborate tracking games that blended Navajo traditions with frontier innovations. Bright Moon watched everything with wide eyes, slowly relaxing into the welcoming atmosphere. "You've built something remarkable here," Sarah said quietly as she and Elena worked side by side. "5 years ago, I wasn't sure you'd survive the scandal. Now look at this place. You're thriving." "We've been fortunate," Elena replied. "The right people stood by us when it mattered, and we've proven that different doesn't mean wrong." "It's more than that," Sarah insisted. "You've shown an entire territory that families come in many forms. Do you know there are 3 other mixed families in the region now? People who saw your courage and decided to build their own bridges." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at this revelation. Their struggle had created pathways for others. Their defiance of convention had expanded what was possible. "I never intended to be a symbol or an example. I just wanted to save my children and honor a good man's promise. The best leaders never seek the role," Sarah observed wisely. "They simply do what's right and others follow." That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, both families gathered for a meal that had become a tradition. The table was crowded with different foods, different languages, different stories, all woven together into a tapestry of community and respect. Ben entertained everyone with an account of tracking a mountain lion, using both English and Navajo to describe the experience. The girls performed a traditional dance Tall Shadow had taught them. Their movements slightly clumsy, but their enthusiasm infectious. After the children had been put to bed and their guests had retired, Elena and Tall Shadow walked to their favorite spot by the creek. The water still flowed, as it had that first winter when everything had seemed impossible. But they had survived. They had more than survived. They had flourished. "I received a letter from Marcus Brennan," Elena said, breaking their comfortable silence. "He's arguing a case before the Territorial Supreme Court about property rights for native peoples married to settlers. He wants to use our story as precedent. And how do you feel about that?" Tall Shadow asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Proud," Elena said simply. "Proud that our choice to love each other might help others. Proud that Morning Star and Rebecca will grow up in a world slightly more accepting than the one we found." "The world changes slowly," Tall Shadow cautioned. "There will be more struggles ahead. The government's treatment of my people grows worse. There may come a time when we face impossible choices. Then we'll face them together, as we always have, Eleanor said firmly. Whatever comes, we've proven that love and family can survive anything. That's not nothing, Tall Shadow. That's everything. He pulled her closer, his weathered face soft with the emotion he no longer tried to hide. When I made that promise to your dying husband, I could not have imagined this life. I thought I was honoring a debt. I did not know I was finding my path home. We both found home, Elena whispered, in the most unexpected place, with the most unlikely person. But isn't that how the best stories always go? They sat in silence, watching stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had witnessed their first tentative alliance, their growing trust, their defiant love. The same stars that would watch over their children and grandchildren, carrying forward the legacy of two people who had refused to accept the limitations others placed on family and love. Inside the house, all was peaceful. Ben slept with David's compass under his pillow, dreaming of the tracking expedition Tall Shadow had promised for tomorrow. Morning Star and Rebecca shared a bed as they always did, their different hands clasped together, even in sleep. Bright Moon rested in the guest room, perhaps dreaming of the possibilities this blended household represented. The Hartley homestead stood as a beacon in the Arizona darkness, a place where two worlds had collided and, instead of destroying each other, had created something beautiful and new. It wasn't perfect. Prejudice still existed beyond their property lines. Struggles lay ahead for the Navajo people and for anyone who dared to cross cultural boundaries. But here, in this small corner of the frontier, love had proven stronger than convention, family had proven more important than tradition, and courage had opened doors that fear had tried to keep closed. 5 years had passed since the hearing, but the real measure of their victory wasn't counted in years. It was counted in children who knew 2 languages and 2 cultures. It was counted in neighbors who had learned to see beyond skin color. It was counted in other families who had found the courage to build their own bridges. It was counted in every sunrise that found Elena and Tall Shadow still standing together, still choosing each other, still proving that the human heart knows no boundaries when it comes to love. "Come," Tall Shadow said finally, rising and offering Elena his hand. "Tomorrow brings new challenges and new joys. Tonight we rest with grateful hearts." Eleanor took his hand, standing and walking with him back toward their home. Their home, not hers or his, but theirs, built on ashes and desperation, strengthened by honor and trust, completed by love that had refused every obstacle placed in its path. As they entered the house and closed the door against the desert night, Eleanor took one last look at the stars. Somewhere up there, she liked to imagine David watched over them, pleased that his final request had been honored so completely. Somewhere, singing rain's spirit smiled at her daughter, healthy and loved. And somewhere in the vast complexity of human history, their story would endure as proof that families could be chosen, that love could transcend difference, and that the bravest pioneers were not those who conquered land, but those who conquered the prejudices of their own hearts. The lamps were extinguished. The house settled into peaceful darkness, and the family that should never have existed, the family that had defied every convention and overcome every obstacle, slept soundly in the home they had built together, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring, secure in the knowledge that together they could survive anything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.